Falling from impossible heights, being left alone in frozen wilderness, waking up after doctors and rescuers were already preparing for the worst. These are the people who lived through situations that should not have been survivable, and somehow they came back. Alcides Moreno's survival story sounds impossible before you even get to the details. In 2007, he was working as a window washer on a Manhattan high-rise when the scaffolding beneath him collapsed. He and his brother fell from the side of the building, dropping 47 stories towards the pavement below. His brother, unfortunately, did not survive. He should not have either. A fall from even a fraction of that height is usually fatal, but when emergency crews reached him, he was still alive. Doctors later said his injuries were catastrophic, but the strange part is that the scaffolding may have actually helped him. Some experts believe he may have clung to the platform as it fell, and that the structure created extra air resistance, almost like a giant unstable board falling through the air, that may have slowed him just enough to prevent instant death. He suffered severe damage throughout his body, but he eventually woke up, spoke to his family, and began recovering. It is one of those cases where survival was not just unlikely, by normal logic it should have been impossible. During World War II, Nicholas Alkemade was a tail gunner in a British Lancaster bomber. In 1944, his aircraft was attacked over Germany and caught fire. The plane was going down, flames were spreading, and he faced a horrifying choice: stay inside the burning aircraft or jump into the darkness without a working parachute. Parachute had reportedly burned, so he chose the only option left. He jumped. He fell around 18,000 feet. There was no backup plan, no emergency chute, and no realistic reason he should have lived. But his fall was broken by pine trees and deep snow, and somehow he survived with relatively minor injuries compared to what should have happened. When German forces captured him, they were very suspicious of his story because it sounded too ridiculous to believe. But when they inspected the wreckage and found his burned parachute, they accepted that he really had fallen from the sky with nothing to slow him down except for trees, snow, and pure luck. Before 50 Cent became one of the biggest names in hip-hop, he survived something that could have ended his life before the world even really knew who he was. In May of 2000, Curtis Jackson was attacked outside of his grandmother's home in Queens, New York. He was shot 9 times at close range. The bullets hit his hand, arm, hip, legs, chest, and face. One of them struck his cheek, leaving him with a slightly slurred vocal sound that later became part of his recognizable delivery. What makes this story so wild is that this was not just one injury that he barely survived. It was repeated trauma to multiple parts of his body, including areas where even one bullet can be fatal. Somehow, he lived. His debut album at Columbia Records was shelved afterward, and for a while his career looked like it might be over before it even started. But instead, the shooting became part of the legend around him. A few years later, he came back with Get Rich or Die Tryin', and the title suddenly felt less like marketing and more like a real-life warning label. His survival is famous, but on a list like this, it still feels unexpected because most people think of 50 Cent as a music story, not as one of the most shocking modern survival cases. Anne Hodges was not climbing a mountain, crossing an ocean, or doing anything dangerous when her impossible survival story happened. She was taking a nap on her couch in Alabama in 1954 when a meteorite crashed through the roof of her house, smashed through the ceiling, bounced off a radio, and hit her in the thigh. That is the kind of thing people joke about because it is so unlikely, but for Anne Hodges, it actually happened. The Smithsonian describes her as the only person in recorded history known to have been directly hit by a meteorite. The rock weighed around 9 pounds, and even after bouncing off the radio first, it left a massive bruise on her body. The disturbing part of this is how random it was. Like, what are the odds? There was no mistake she made, no risk she chose, no dangerous situation that she walked into. A piece of space literally came through her house and struck her while she was sleeping. She survived, of course, but the aftermath turned bizarre too. The meteorite became the center of a legal dispute between Hodges and her landlady over who owned it. Landlady? I got hit with it. You don't own it. What are you talking about? Landlords, they never change. So not only did Anne survive one of the rarest impacts ever recorded, but then she had to fight over the rock that almost could have killed her. Insane. Bahia Bakari's survival story is almost impossible to picture. Yemenia Flight 626 crashed into the Indian Ocean near the Comoros Islands. The rest of the 152 people on board died, but Bahia survived the impact and ended up alone in the dark water, clinging to floating wreckage. She had little swimming experience, no life vest, and was surrounded by rough ocean in the middle of the night. For hours, she held on. She later described not being able to see anything around her, just darkness, water, and pieces of the destroyed aircraft. Rescue crews eventually found her alive after she had been floating in the ocean for roughly half a day. The reason this case feels so unreal is that surviving the crash itself should have been nearly impossible, but surviving the crash, then surviving the ocean, then surviving long enough to be found is something else entirely. She became known as the Miracle Girl, and honestly, it's kinda hard to argue with that. Poon Lim's survival story is one of the most extreme ocean survival cases ever recorded. In 1942, he was working aboard the British merchant ship SS Ben Lomond when it was sunk in the South Atlantic. He managed to escape onto a small wooden life raft, but then he was left alone in the open ocean with limited supplies and no guarantee that anyone would ever find him. At first, he survived on emergency rations, but then when those ran low, he had to improvise everything. He collected rainwater, made fishing tools, caught fish and seabirds, and did whatever he could to keep himself alive. The ocean became both his prison and his only source of food. For 133 days he drifted alone. That is more than 4 months of exposure, hunger, thirst, and watching the horizon for ships that might never come. When Brazilian fishermen finally found him, he was weak, but he was alive. His survival remains one of the longest confirmed solo raft survival stories in history. Anna Bågenholm's case is one of the most extreme medical survival stories ever documented. In 1999, she was skiing in Norway when she fell through ice and became trapped under a frozen stream. Her body was underwater, but she managed to find a small air pocket beneath the ice. That air pocket kept her alive for a while, but the cold slowly shut her body down. By the time rescuers pulled her out, her core body temperature had dropped to 13.7 degrees Celsius. I'm pretty sure that the human body is supposed to be about 37 degrees Celsius. So that is so far below normal body temperature that most people would assume survival was impossible. She was not breathing normally, and her circulation had essentially stopped. But doctors refused to give up. They slowly warmed her blood and worked for hours to restart her body. Against all expectations, Anna survived and eventually recovered. Her case became famous because it proved something doctors now repeat in extreme hypothermia cases. No one is gone until they are warm and still cannot be revived. Truman Duncan's survival story is hard to even process. In 2006, he was working at a rail yard in Texas when he was caught in a horrific train accident. Most people in that situation would die almost immediately, but Duncan remained conscious long enough to do something almost unbelievable. He called 911 himself. In that call, he told the operator he had been run over by a rail car and needed help fast. The fact that he was even able to speak, explain what happened, and stay mentally present is what makes this case so shocking. Emergency responders reached him, and doctors somehow managed to save him. He later said he focused on his family and used that thought to keep himself alive. It is not a clean survival story. It is absolutely horrifying, but it belongs here because medically, physically, and logically, he should not have been able to survive long enough to make that call, let alone live through what came after. Louis Zamperini had already lived an extraordinary life before his survival story began. He was an Olympic runner, and during World War II, he served as a bombardier. In 1943, his plane crashed into the Pacific Ocean during a search and rescue mission. Zamperini and 2 other crew members survived on small rafts with almost no supplies. For 47 days, they drifted through heat, storms, hunger, thirst, and shark attacks. What makes this case even more unbelievable is that the ocean was not the end of it. After 47 days, Zamperini was captured and spent years in brutal wartime captivity. So his survival story came in layers. He survived a plane crash, then he survived weeks adrift in the Pacific, then he survived years of starvation, abuse, and psychological pressure. His life later became the subject of the book and film Unbroken, and honestly, the title fits. Some survival stories are about one impossible event, and somehow he survived a chain of them. Tsutomu Yamaguchi's story is honestly impossible to comprehend. In August 1945, he was in Hiroshima on a business trip when the first atomic bomb was dropped. He was badly burned and injured, but he survived. He then made his way back home to Nagasaki. 3 days later, while still wounded, he was in Nagasaki when the second atomic bomb was dropped. There were other people affected by both bombings, but he became the only person officially recognized by the Japanese government as a survivor of both. He lived for decades afterward and became an advocate against nuclear weapons. His survival is not just statistically shocking, it is historically devastating. To be present for one of those events and live would already be almost impossible. To survive both 3 days apart feels like the kind of story that should just not exist, but it does. And that is why he belongs at number 1 for sure. All right, guys, that has been our list for today. Thanks so much for checking it out. I've been your host today, Olivia Kozlowski, and I will see you again soon. Bye!